All right, the final lecture for this evening, for this week's module, is going to be on the big picture mindset. This won't be a very long video lecture here, but we want to talk about this big picture mindset. There's a whole other series of lessons we could go into on the limited leader, the narrow-minded leader, the narrow-focused leader, and talk about that. But I find many times that some leaders struggle because they absolutely cannot get a big picture mindset. Most people have tunnel vision, to be honest, when it comes to life. You know, they see what they see, and they forget that there's a whole lot outside of their scope of vision. You know, God gave us linear vision. That's what we have. We pretty well see linear. God sees panoramically. He sees everything at once. You know, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the truth is, we see our here and now, right now. God sees 1,000 years ago at the same moment he sees today. He sees 1,000,000 years into the future right now. We can't do that. We see right here. So it's not surprising that a lot of leaders are challenged to have a big picture mindset. Especially, I'll say this, that I think as one ages and matures in leadership, it's easier to develop a big picture mindset. Because when you're young, from your teenage years onward, when you get that independence as a young adult, most of your thoughts are about how life affects you, how the world affects you, how the church affects you, how your job affects you, how relationships affect you. You're very you-focused. We're designed that way. That's the way we are. But as we get older, we begin to broaden our view that there are other people in the world, other endeavors in the world, that it's not all about me, you know, and we understand that. But as a young leader, if you're a youth pastor, you're a music director, you're a men's leader, you're whatever it is you do in the church, whatever, even as a pastor, you can very easily get tunnel vision on your area of ministry and think that's all that really matters. To you, that's the most important thing in the church. Why? Everybody ought to get behind that. Everybody ought to support that. Everybody ought to give to that. And you forget that everybody's not as passionate about it as you are, and that honestly, the church is a whole lot bigger than just children's ministry. It's a whole lot more than just the hyphen group. It's definitely a lot more than just the praise and worship team. It's more than ladies' ministries. You know, it's all of this working together. Big picture mindset is the ability to see the whole organization and all of its needs. To see the whole organization. To take a step back and say, look, it's not just about what I'm doing in my little part of the world, but how does everything else fit into this? How does what everybody else is doing affect what I do? How is what I'm doing, how does that affect everything else? In a big picture mindset, you begin to understand that everything affects everything else. I think I mentioned this in a previous lecture, but a great book to read if you ever get the opportunity is called Leadership and the New Science by Margaret Weaver. It's kind of a heavy book, it's an in-depth book, but it talks about leadership from the viewpoint of Newtonian physics or quantum physics. You know, Newtonian physics is kind of like, you know, Newton and the theory, you know, the law of gravity. The apple falls, hits the ground, and that's the effect of gravity. That's the law of gravity. So Newtonian physics talks about the individual impact any one thing makes. That's very simplistic, but that's what it would come down to. On the other hand, quantum physics says that as that apple breaks free from the tree and the branch shakes and the apple falls through the air is affected by the apple falling. The air is affected by the branch going up and down as the apple is released. The ground is affected by the apple when it hits the ground, and that effect, then that air goes out and affects some other tree, which may affect a bird to fly off, which may fly off somewhere it hadn't been intending to go. So there's a longer range effect from any one event. Big picture mindset in a mature leader's mind says, look, what I'm doing doesn't affect just me, it affects the entire organization. I've got to see the entire organization and every need of the organization. You know, one of the challenges of pastoring good leaders and leaders that have a passion is learning to bridle their passion and get them to have a big picture mindset. You want them to believe that their area of ministry is incredibly important. It is. But they've got to see how it all fits together. How that what they do, if it's not in harmony with what we're doing in other areas, they can be one causing the problem. They can be the cog in all of it that's all jammed up and keeps everything from flowing the way that it ought to. I remember when I was a kid, and probably many of you did the same thing, my mom and dad took us to the circus. There was a 3-ring circus that came to town. I think it was Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus. Wasn't as big as Ringling Brothers, but it was a pretty big circus that traveled around for several years back in the 70s. And we went to the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, and I was amazed. I mean, you sat there, it's a huge, massive tent, and it was a 3-ring circus. It had one ring over here with elephants in it, had one ring here with the trapeze artist in it, one ring over here with a lion tamer in it, and something was going on in every ring the whole time. Every ring had a ringmaster. It had someone that was over did this with the elephants. He made sure all of that did right. The one with the trapeze artist, he had to make sure that everything was just right. The one over here with the lions in that ringmaster had to make sure it was right. So you've got these ringmasters and you've got the activities going on in their rings, but sometimes hidden away and unseen by everybody was what they called the circus master. He had to make sure that what was going on in all 3 rings worked together and made the circus. Because the trapeze artist alone is not the circus. The elephants alone are not the circus. It's everything working together. Some churches turn into a circus because everybody thinks there's a ring is the only thing going on. When a true circus is multi-ring, it could be like a 3-ring, 4-ring, 10-ring circus, however many different ministries you have in the church. But you need to make sure that your area, yes, it's happening, it's working, but never forget there's a circus master, there's your pastor, there's the main key leadership of the church that's having to step back and say, yeah, but what you're doing, that's perfect because it's working exactly the way it ought to over here. This is working exactly the way it ought to over here. So that there's a harmony to what's going on. And it's that circus master sometimes that's going to want to say to you, look, we can't do that right now. That's not going to work. That'll frustrate you if you don't have a big picture mindset. If you're not able to see everything that's going on. That's why it's good for leaders to be involved in more than one area in a church. The more they're involved in, the more they understand the dynamic of how it all works together. The only culture you get in a church is the one that you create. You have to create a culture. And it takes years to create an effective culture. I can give you from personal experience in the church that we are blessed to serve and to pastor. We're doing our best to create a long-term culture within that church. We're constantly, even as recently as the last couple weeks before this recording, talking to key leaders about cultural shifts and cultural changes that are coming down the road. That we're trying to let God give us far vision and near vision and trying to work those together. But you know, it's little things, for instance, that in our Kingdom Kids Sunday School program, we don't do traditional Sunday school. It's not the most effective for us. But in our Kingdom Kids setting, we have a greeter at the door. We have ushers in there that take up offerings. We have singers and a choir. They're a little church within the church. Why? Because that's the culture of the church. You want them to start learning it young, and then we have our young people that teach in there on a regular basis. Why? So that they can give back to the generation behind them. We ask our hyphen group to be involved with the youth at different activities and fundraisers on a regular basis. Why? So they're giving back to the youth group that they came out of. We're slowly working that up where every part of the church will be reaching back to the group that it just left. As you age and move from one area of ministry in the church to another, you'll constantly be reaching back. If you start that with your young kids with this big picture mindset, well, that 5-year-old really don't get it, that 8-year-old really doesn't. No, not at 5 and 8, but at 16 and 17 they will. They'll remember they were on the receiving and the giving end, and it will become an expectation that when I move out of Kingdom Kids, I still get to come back and give back. When I move into the youth group, I still will reach back. When I move into hyphen, I will reach back. But it takes a big picture mindset to say everybody has to work together. This all has to flow. Our kids choir learns the songs that we do in a regular service so that they don't just thrown into it someday when they're old enough to be in the choir or on the praise and worship team. That's a big picture mindset. You have to make that thread all the way through it. Where are we going? What's our vision? What's our objective? And can I see all of it at once? In Exodus 18, 14 through 24, I'm not going to read all of this. Let me just kind of jump through it a little bit. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, what is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by even from morning unto even, stand by thee from morning to even? Moses said unto his father-in-law, because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses, his father-in-law, said unto him, this thing that thou doest is not good. So instead of reading all the rest of this scripture, let me cut to the end of the chase here and tell you what it is that is happening here. Here's Moses leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness. He's got these millions of people that he has to lead on a regular basis. Now, when the pillar of cloud moved by day and the pillar of fire by night, they had to pack up and move with it. But there were many days the pillar never moved. Many days they set up camp and stayed in the same place. And when they did, when you have that many people, you're going to have conflicts. You're going to have issues. You're going to have problems. Moses thought that it was his responsibility to sit down on a rock somewhere every day and tell people, well, just line up here if you got a problem. Line up here if you got a question. Line up here if that's what he felt he should do. He said, that's what he told Jethro, his father-in-law. I get this image of his father-in-law standing over there watching this day after day. He's watching these people line up day after day, and he watches Moses sit there all day long, one person after the other. I often wonder if he doesn't say, I told that girl not to marry that boy. He's not thinking straight. And that's basically, he goes to Moses and says, what are you doing? What is this thing that you're doing? Well, what do you think I'm doing? I'm being the leader. I'm sitting here and I'm answering all these questions and I'm solving all these problems and I'm judging between them and God and I'm helping people out. I'm the man. I'm the leader. I got it. Jethro looks at him and says, this thing that you're doing is not good. What are you thinking? You can't do this on your own. The only thing you're ever going to do on your own is fail. I have a feeling Israel would have been a lot longer in the wilderness if Moses would have kept doing that. Can you imagine being in a line waiting to talk? I love pastoring, but I don't want 100 people lined up after every service. I just don't want that. It shouldn't be like that. I don't need to be the answer man for everybody. I don't want to be the one that solves everybody's problems. But Moses felt like, I've got to solve this all. I got to deal with this all. And Jethro says, no, don't do that. He said, here's what you need to do. You need to look at the whole of Israel. You need to get a big picture mindset here and realize what it is you need to be doing. There's no way you can get to millions of people at the same time. Now, you can effectively lead them, but if you're going to do it, you've got to get a big picture mindset. And here's what he said. He said, find some able men, men that fear God, men that have integrity, that hate covetousness, and make them rulers over thousands, and make some rulers over hundreds, and some rulers over 50s, and some rulers over 10s. He said, find a man that can lead 10 people, and let him lead them. Then find a man that can lead 100 people, and he'll lead the 10 leaders of the 10s, and there's 100. If you've got some that are able to lead 1,000, let them take the hundreds and the 10s, and those guys will answer to him, but he'll lead the thousands. He said, if you'll do this, you'll create a leadership team with a big picture mindset, and you know they're all going to know what you ought to do. They're going to know what to do. They're going to follow your leading, but you're going to effectively distribute leadership the way it ought to be. But Moses, you got to get a big picture mindset. If you're going to have a revival church and you're going to have effective leadership, you're going to have to develop a big picture mindset that gets the focus off of only what you're doing, and you ask yourself on a regular basis, how is what I'm doing a part of the whole? Is what I'm doing adding to or taking away from? Am I putting too much focus here and demanding too much time, too much attention, too much budget, and other things are hurting because I don't have a big picture mindset? God has a big picture mindset for the church. Churches all over the world having revival. Churches all over the world that are growing and becoming what God wants them to be. If you want to be part of that kind of a church, you will have to develop a big picture mindset to be effective in your local assembly.